morning, everybody, and welcome to Coffee and Football, presented by Rick Favreau and Austin Underground. I'm your host, Blake Monroe, where I'm joined daily by Bobby Burton and Jerry Hamilton. Tell us where you're checking in from, what you're drinking, get your questions in. But, Jerry, I know you got a question for the chat. I'm going to let you go ahead and ask.
I do. So I was driving around Houston yesterday, made a couple of school stops, which we'll get to in a second on recruiting. And I was thinking for the chat, I want y'all to predict who will be on Texas football next year. Because this year it was the SEC Player of the Year, Connor Weigman and Quinn Ewers. So who predict the cover of Texas football next year? Is it the Manning family? Is it Sark and Arch? Is it Pickle Mielko? Who's going to be on the cover of Texas football? Oh, by the way, John Calipari, you left your Manscaped in Moody last night. Looking for it.
Oh gosh. My prediction though is Sark and Arch. By the way, I was thinking.
I thought everything in Texas ran through Lubbock. Where's Joey McGuire?
I doubt they'll be on the cover. Yeah. All right, Jerry. Yesterday you were on the road a little bit. You saw Nick Townsend, his signing ceremony, which leads me. We'll talk about that, but also the final class rankings. Texas #1 from all recruiting services, guys.
Yeah, I mean, Bobby. It's been a while for Texas since 2002. Did a consensus #1 ranked recruiting class, and all four of your national ranking services, your ESPN 247 On3 rivals, all had Texas #1 and by a decent margin in today's day and age. And they did it with 3 less signees than Georgia did. So that's the strength of the depth of that class for Texas, Bobby. And I mean, I know we talked about it in December, but now that all the dust is settled and everybody's signed, I thought we should, talk about how the significance of that for Texas. And by the way, I was at Decaney, even though Nicholas Townsend had already signed. Some of his teammates were not going to sign until February. So I went by Decaney yesterday. I'm going to have about a 13-minute interview on OTF YouTube later with Nick Townsend today or tomorrow that we did yesterday. But this is him with his parents. They had a ceremony for all the kids at Decaney. And since he's not an early graduate, he was part of that. And I think you guys will like that. And by the way, he predicted, as well as the Decaney track coach predicted, Bobby, he'll be at 225 at peak of track season. He'll lose 5 more pounds. They're predicting low 21 point in the 200 for him at 225.
Jeez. That's fun.
My take on Nick Townsend has been the same from day one. Big, freaky athlete.
Yeah,
that likes contact. Like that's a little bit of the difference that I know. Like I still don't know if Michael Terry likes contact, if that makes sense, Jerry. And he's a big, freaky athlete too. Yeah. I know that Jonah Williams does and Nick Townsend does. So I want to see where Michael Terry falls on that category of these guys that are tall and or have size to them and still have some physicality. Look, I tell you what. Thought process here as we talk about the consensus #1 ranked recruiting class. The strength of this class, in your opinion, Jerry, is it wide receiver, where Chris Jackson was named by at least one publication, the Texas wide receivers coach's National Recruiter of the Year, for getting Daylon McCutcheon, Khalid Lockett, and Jamie French. Those 3, as well as Michael Terry, if you put him as a receiver. So it would actually be 4, or, is it the secondary where you bring in a Jonah Williams and a Zealous Hicks at safety and then get a Cade Phillips and Caleb Chester at corner? What do you think the strengths of this Texas recruiting class are? And I also want to go one step further. Let's talk a little bit about Chris Jackson and his group of receivers that he brought in. Because it is, even in the day and age where NIL is king, right? And NIL remains king. We know that. Chris Jackson had a hell of a year.
Yeah. So my strength of this class is the SEC size speed combo overall. We've hit on this before, but I think that's the real strength of this class, because we just talked about Nick Townsend. And by the way, I do think he starts his career at tight end at Texas. A guy like that who's going to be 6'3.5", 250 pounds, running 4.5, playing tight end. That's a different level athlete. That's SEC level athlete plus some. Elijah Bo Barnes at linebacker is 6'2" and whatever and a half, 240 with that size speed combination. Jonah Williams at safety. Lance Jackson, Justice Terry. By the way, if you're not a member of OnTexasFootball.com, I put out last night, Justice Terry is going to begin his career in Baron Sorrell's position. That doesn't mean he won't cross-train, but I think while he continues to build his frame out to be big enough to be an interior player in the SEC, he's going to start his career on the edge when spring practices start. But Justice Terry, Lance Jackson, Charles and Sharma, their athleticism with the SEC size, right? And you just go down in the receivers, which we'll talk about, they're SEC size guys, Jamie French and Khalik Lockett, especially against the bigger, longer corners in the conference. So I think it was a class that was built really good on defense. I really like the addition to Cade Phillips late at corner. I know Bobby kind of put it over the top defensively, but this is a SEC high-end defensive class. And it's amazing what's happened at the edge position. Somebody asked a question on TexasFootball.com about that. Does Texas have the best edge group in the country next year? And I'd say it's arguable that they do. What the work that's been done there, the size whether it's through the portal with Brad Spence, whether it's with Elijah Barnes, they were adding at linebacker. I really like what they did defensively in this class and through the portal so far. But it's a big deal to have. I know people say some people are mixed on class rankings and prospect rankings, but one, it matters when you sign a number one class with your message to kids. Kids notice it. Kids notice Texas differently. And recruiting rankings do matter. Doesn't mean they're an exact science. No, neither is the NFL draft, but it does matter because Nick Saban signed 13 of them and he won 6 national titles at Alabama.
Yep. Look, first of all, on Justice Terry, and that you broke a little news with that, Jerry, him starting out at defensive end, because frankly, that opens up a spot at defensive tackle that many thought, hey, that a freshman might backfill there. Well, that puts the onus more on Myron Charles and Josiah Sharma to fill that role as freshmen, right? Yeah. If there is one to be had based on what Texas does in the portal. But Terry, when I met him in person down in Manchester, Georgia, when I went down there for his signing ceremony, Jerry, I thought he reminded me physically of Alfred Collins.
Yeah.
That's who I walked. I told you that when I walked out of the gym at his signing ceremony. I called you and said, who does he remind you of? And I go, existing player, same age, Alfred Collins.
Yeah.
And so that, from that standpoint, for me, that's not surprising because remember, Alfred Collins switched between the 3 and 5 technique on defensive line the first 2 years in Austin. Now, I will tell you this, based on what you've said and from behind the scenes with Justin Terry may be more of a football player early than Alfred Collins. And what I mean by that is Alfred, as much as talented as he was, he hadn't been really focused on football entirely. And then COVID hit a little bit, and then he got injured. Justice Terry may be a little bit more in that vein, I guess, ready to go, or I don't even know if ready to go is the right word, but just more serious about it. I want to add this. You mentioned the secondary, and I mentioned the secondary. Jerry, the shortest member of the secondary that they brought in, Caleb Chester at 6'1".
Yeah.
I mean, they brought in 4 guys, Zealous Hicks, Jonah Williams, both 6'2", 6'3" guys, right?
Yeah.
Cade Phillips, 6'2", long arms. Caleb Chester, long arms, 6'1". I think while I do believe that the wide receivers in this group are the star-studded class, if that makes sense, I'm not so sure that the secondary isn't the best group long term. I could see easily 3 starters out of that group coming up, and not next year, obviously, but long term out of that. I'm a believer there. And then Charles Sharma, Terry, those are legit dudes. Lance Jackson, Smith Orogbo. It's a number one class for a reason.
Yeah, exactly.
I want to put it that way. I mean, it's just everywhere you look, there's somebody.
Well, I mean, just further on that class, 11 players ranked in the top 100 in the country somewhere, 14 ranked in the top 150 somewhere. That's a depth of class too. And I believe Caleb Chester's an underrated guy. I think Nick Brooks is going to end up being a guy that is going to people look back on and say he's underrated. I want to say this on Justice Terry though, real quick, because I want to be clear on this. That doesn't mean he's always going to be out there. He's going to be sitting in the defensive tackle meeting rooms because that's where he's eventually going to go. But look, he's 272, 275 pounds. And it's going to take him a while to get to be big enough to where you want to play him inside in the SEC. Now, that doesn't mean in NASCAR package, things like that, you can't see him and Lance Jackson. But I think right now, for his development, I think he's going to develop in the D-line, enter a D-line room with Kenny Baker. But I think it's going to benefit him long-term, Bobby, to start his play a little bit of both while he's building his body. I think it's going to be really good for his versatility. And Texas is extremely high on him because he's a professional, kind of what you're hitting on, like Kelvin Banks was. It's a professional mindset when he came into Texas. But I love this recruiting class. And again, they had the number one class with 3 less signees than Georgia. 12 of your top 25 were SEC schools. Teams that finished in the top 10, 12, depending on where rankings were in the SEC, was Texas, Georgia, Alabama, pretty much 1, 2, 3. Then you had Auburn, A&M, LSU, Tennessee, Florida, who all fluctuated between 7 and 11, wherever teams are ranked. Yeah, you had Oklahoma and South Carolina in the top 20, Missouri around the top 20, Ole Miss around the top 20, Mississippi State, Kentucky inside the top 30, Arkansas in the top 35. So the talent coming into the conference is at an all-time high. But does that mean you're going to be the best conference every year? Nope, guys got to go get it done. But the talent coming into the conference is insane, and especially when you consider that Texas moved into the SEC and signed the number one class.
There was a comment that you brought up, Blake, that I thought was really good, and it was, I believe it was from Dean Neisner. Yeah. This class is more than the number one ranking. It fits the needs for players we need to replace the players we lost. So I've always argued this, and Jerry knows this as well, that the number one class needs to address every need you have, theoretically, or else it's just a ranking without a reason, right? And in my opinion, that is the case with Texas right now in that regard. So I feel like they got running back, wide receiver, DB, defensive line, edge, linebacker. Every single piece has been answered right now. Okay, yeah. We got breaking news here. Don't know if y'all are seeing this now. Matt Zenitz. This is not good for Texas, in my opinion. But I'm sure Texas will hire someone in return. But one of Texas's own, Blake Gideon, is apparently heading to Georgia Tech to become the Yellow Jackets defensive coordinator and associate head coach. That is according to Matt Zenitz. If you'll bring that tweet up, Blake, that would be helpful. This is breaking news right now. Georgia Tech is set to hire Texas associate head coach, safeties coach Blake Gideon as its new defensive coordinator. Jerry and Blake.
He turned down Mississippi State last year.
Yeah, he turned down Mississippi State last year. He's trying to move forward. Frankly, he is blocked right now in Austin. He's not going to become that over guys like Johnny Nansen or Pete Kwiatkowski. So, Jerry?
I think it's great for Blake because, look, his ultimate goal one day is to be the head coach at Texas. If he can ever be that or be a Power 4 head coach, depending on what happens. But I think it's a great move for Blake Gideon. If you're not trying to there's some guys as they get older that they're fine being assistant coaches. They don't want to be a head coach. Blake Gideon's not that guy. He wants to be a Power 4 head coach. I mean, there's no doubt about it. So he turned down Mississippi State last year, which I thought was smart because they offered him the DC gig. Georgia Tech's in a different position than Mississippi State. They clearly are a competitive team in the ACC with some really good players coming back at quarterback, running back. Has got some talent there on defense. They won enough battles in the Metro Atlanta area defensively. They got some good kids coming in. But I think it's a great move for Blake Gideon, and congrats to him. And I'm guessing we'll see him back at Texas one day, is my bet.
Hope so. Good guy, good family. His dad, I first met his dad. Jeez, Jerry.
Oh, yeah.
30 years ago. Former head coach at Leander. Blake's got a wife, kid as well. That's a tough one for me because I think he's a good person and a good representative of the University of Texas. But I wish him well, onward and upward for Blake Gideon. He's going to go be a defensive coordinator, call plays at Georgia Tech. Good luck to Blake in his future. No doubt about it. A guy that I've known for a long time, stepping to a different area. Congratulations to Blake. I'm really, really happy for him. Somewhat sad, but happy for him if that's what he thinks he needs to do with his life.
Yeah, I mean, look, he wants to be a head coach. I think it's great for him. I just said that before. If you want to be a head coach, then you gotta take those necessary steps, and he's taken it. And again, Texas held on to him a year longer than he could have left last year to be a SEC DC. But I think he wisely turned down a tough situation. I think this was a smart play for him because Georgia Tech's a good situation. They're all
Georgia Tech's a winnable situation compared to Mississippi State. No offense to Mississippi State, you win 8 games there. You're doing a great job. Georgia Tech, outside of Clemson, nobody's really claimed the SEC the ACC at this point.
Yeah,
it could be a launching pad for him.
Definitely.
And it's in Atlanta. He coached at Georgia State, Jerry.
Yes. Actually, he's recruited the area.
Yep, he's familiar with that territory.
Yeah, recruited the area at Ole Miss. So, look, he's a riser in the coaching rankings, and I do believe he'll be a head coach. I don't know where that'll be. I do believe he'll be a collegiate head coach one day. I think
he did recruit Jonah Williams and Zealous Hicks. Yep. Zealous Hicks out of the Atlanta area. Jonah Williams out of Galveston Ball, obviously, but. Breaking news: Blake Gideon, Texas defensive coordinator, Texas safeties coach, to become Georgia Tech's defensive coordinator. As Jerry mentioned, we didn't report this last year, but it was well known behind the scenes that Blake turned down the opportunity to be the defensive coordinator at Mississippi State a year ago to stay at Texas. So, all right, that's big news for Longhorn fans. Blake Monroe. Yes, what do we have next other than still talking about, the recruiting class that kind of interrupted us, right in the middle of it. The position that I do wonder if Texas got their home run player is running back, Jerry. Like we talked about the needs, Dean Nessmeyer talked about the needs. Did Texas get a future NFL high-level running back in this class?
I believe they did. I'm big on James Simon. I'm a James Simon believer. I'm a James Simon fan. I think instinctively he has got it. I think frame-wise he's got it to build on. I think he'll be a 5'11", 5'11 and a half, 215, 220-pound guy. We've had his father, John, on here a couple times. I do think Texas got a very, very good running back and a guy that's going to is a good back in the SEC as well in this class. And I'm not saying it's going to happen next year, right? Because all that depends on Jarrett Gibson holding on to the football, C.J. Baxter coming back from injury, how that timeline happens for C.J. Baxter. But I will not be surprised if this spring we don't hear really positive things about James Simon. I think he's going to pick it up fast. I think he's got really good instincts. I think he can run inside zone. I also think he has the instincts, the patience to run outside zone. I think he catches the ball well out of the backfield. He'll be a little bit ahead of others in pass pro understanding because of his father. I think James Simon's going to be a really good player. Really good player. Remember, he picked Texas over Notre Dame. Notre Dame's had a pretty good eye for running backs here in the last 2 or 3 years.
Yes, they have. I would agree.
I mean, if he ends up being like Jadarian Price, you'd take him all day long.
Right. Well, I'm with you on that. All right. If that's the case, I think that look, Longhorns, maybe they didn't get an offensive tackle. If you wanted to be, very picky about what your assessment is, what do you think about that? Did Texas get an offensive tackle in the 2025 class?
I do think they did. Okay. I think Nick Brooks will play tackle at Texas. Okay. We've heard some.
Really, he's more a right tackle, not a left tackle, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, yes. So far, yeah. And here's the thing with Nick Brooks for the fans, though, that he could even start in year one his career guard. There's been some really good guys that have done that, and Flood's done that with guys before. Evan Neal was a guard, kicked out the tackle. And I'm not talking about Flood here, but you can just go back and look at it. Lael Collins early on at LSU played guard, kicked out the tackle. So it could depend on need, but I do think Nick Brooks is going to be a tackle long-term from what I'm hearing. I think he's got a really good chance to be. He's impressed early on in Austin. He's a good athlete. That move from Iowa to Grayson was really good for him as a senior because he lost 20 pounds. He played against Power 4 guys every day in practice, probably a couple of guys that will be in the NFL one day. He went up against a high-level edge kid who signed with Georgia Tech, Blake Gideon's guy. That kid's a really good player. He's 6'2" `25", but that guy can rush the passer. The kid from Grayson going to Georgia Tech, he'll be a good player for them off the edge. And then playing against Mbaktu and guys like that, they have multiple guys at Grayson that are big athletes on the defensive line. I think that helped Nick Brooks immensely and is going to help prepare him for spring practice at Texas. But I think Nick Brooks will play tackle at Texas.
All right, guys. Before we move on here, Bobby, I need you to tell everyone about Austin Underground.
Yeah, absolutely. Since 2004, Austin Underground has specialized in difficult underground commercial installations. The team's engineering background gives Austin Underground the ability to perform work other firms often consider just too risky. Rick Vavro and his team offer an end-to-end client experience, including seamless communication, budgeting, staffing, and top-notch trade partners. And most importantly, they produce solid quality work each and every time. That's Austin Underground. And Rick also wants to invite you out to his bar. He's an entrepreneur, started a bar out in Jonestown near the lake. Give him a call or stop by it. The Lone Star Bar. Rick Vavro doing it up right in this great state of Texas. Again, Austin Underground, thank you so much, as well as the Lone Star Bar.
I guess it's time to address the Arkansas basketball game.
I was about to say, a lot of people want to talk about it, Jerry. A lot of people don't want to talk about it.
I said at the beginning of the show, Coach Cal left his handyman in the Moody last night. So if anybody knows Cal, look, Texas got bullied on the perimeter in that game. On your dribble handoff action, Arkansas bullied Texas in the first half of that game. They beat him to spots, beat him to the ball, took the ball, and led to transitions. And it led to numbers in transitions. Obviously, you had a couple injuries in that game, early. Caden Shetter played through some real pain. Devin Pryor pulled a calf muscle, but doesn't matter. That was as ugly as it gets for Texas last night. Let's just be real. We got to be real about it. That was bad. When you get bullied on your own home court, out physical on the wings at the guard position, that was a bad look last night for a lot of that game.
It was a bad look because they couldn't hit, they couldn't shoot. And look, for the first 30 minutes, they looked dead. I mean, I don't know how else to say that. It was uninspired. I don't know what to say other than it wasn't a pretty first 30 minutes. They seemed to come alive with about 12 minutes to go in the game and made it a little bit more of a game, but they never got it, I think, below 5 or 6 there at the end. I don't know, Jerry. I mean, it felt too much like, look, they shot the ball 64 times. They outshot Arkansas by 14 shots. Typically speaking, you're going to win a basketball game when that happens. I don't know. In the first half alone, I will say this. In the first half alone, Arkansas went to the free throw line, talking about getting bullied. Arkansas went to the free throw line 18 times. Texas went to the free throw line 3 times in the first half. And I agree. I mean, what it also does, Jerry, now Arkansas is 14-8 and Texas is 15-8.
Yeah.
If you're choosing between those two guys to go to the NCAA tournament, well, one has a direct win.
Well, yeah, I mean, but Arkansas's got work to do because they're way behind on that. But my thing is, look, does this mean Texas is going to not make the tournament? No. Like when Kentucky comes to town, Arkansas bullied Kentucky. Kentucky's soft, right? Offensively, they're really skilled, but they're soft. I mean, Arkansas went in and scored 90 against them, essentially 88, I think it was. But what it does, that was a 2 steps forward, 1 step, maybe 2 steps back game for RT is what that was. Now you go play at Vanderbilt because the key with that Arkansas game was Texas had built up a resume, and the RT talk is something different. We're just talking about this game. Had built up a pretty good resume. They had 3 quad one wins. They were up to 25 in NCAA.net, 21 in ESPN BPI. They were actually ascending in the NCAA tournament seeding. But what that loss does, and that's why I made that post on Texas Football yesterday, how big of a game that was, that could have got you to 500 before a stretch of at Vanderbilt, Alabama, and Kentucky. Now you got a 3-game stretch that's really difficult coming off, I think, your worst performance since UConn. Honestly, that was the worst Texas has looked since the UConn game. So now what's the bounce back going to be? Is Caden Shedrick going to be healthy? I mean, back spasms are to deal with. And is he going to be healthy? Kendall Weaver's a couple of weeks away. Doubt Devin Pryor's got the calf strain. Where are they at? Because then now you go play at Vanderbilt, who's pretty good this year. Coach is doing a good job over there. So it puts them in a bind. Again, when you look at it, you got to say 8-10 gets you in the tournament, but what does that do for RT? That's a different discussion. But you had a chance if you won that game to jump to a 9-9. You were actually predicted to go 10-8 by Bart Torvik and some of those guys who do the predictions. So now you're really probably 2 steps back heading into that tough 3-game stretch.
It just wasn't pretty. Yeah. It was just as a guy that was starting to believe in Texas basketball a little bit, and I'll imagine I will say they were starting to reel me in after the last 3 or 4 games and wins and a close loss at Ole Miss. That was a setback mentally. As much as the end score was, it was more mental for me because they had no chance. 25, 30. I mean, they were just suffocated. It was ugly. So, all right, if you missed the top of the news, it broke while we were about 5 to 10 minutes in. Blake Gideon has been has taken the Georgia Tech defensive coordinator's job. That is the Texas Longhorn safeties coach that's a former player at Texas, obviously, has been with Sark from the very get-go at Texas. He is leaving to become the defensive coordinator at Georgia Tech. It is a major promotion for Blake. He'll be calling plays over at Georgia Tech. And he was blocked in Austin from that because you have not only do you have Pete Kwiatkowski, you also have Johnny Nansen, who has coordinator experience and is co-defensive coordinator as well. So our best wishes to Blake Gideon. That is probably the big news of the day that will break today. Jerry, another thing we didn't talk about because you were out and about yesterday, Max Wright commits to the University of Texas yesterday. You were on the road. The big offensive lineman out of Melissa choosing the Longhorns becomes the 3rd commitment for Texas in this recruiting cycle.
Was one of the more improved players from sophomore to junior tape on Huddle that I watched. He got more athletic, got more physical, got in a better position technically, especially as the season moves along in this Huddle. You can start to see him play with more of a flat back as he's developing. He's got some push in the run game. He's a guy that I know I got many texts yesterday. Is this guy a tackle only? He's a swing player. He could be a tackle. He could be a guard. Does this affect how many tackles Texas takes in the class? No, they want 2 more guys. and they're set up to get 2 more guys. Who that is, we'll see how the dust settles, how it all plays out. But this does not affect offensive tackle recruiting other than he's a really good player. When colleges, all the colleges that went through Melissa, you see how he moves better as this tape moves along throughout his junior year too. But when coaches went through Melissa here in January, February, I mean, Michigan, Florida, you name it, everybody that came through offered him. He had 11 Power 4 offers in the last month before committing to Texas. But he was always going to Texas if Texas wanted him. This is a guy who wants to wear the uniform. It's going to mean something for him to wear the uniform. I think he's a guy who, if he continues on his trajectory, I think this is a really solid take by Kyle Flood. Now, what position he plays, I think he'll start his career at guard early, and we'll see what happens with him. But it doesn't affect the tackles Texas is going after. I mean, Turntines, Samu to Samuel Rosenborough, Felix Ojo, all those guys. It doesn't affect the recruitment of any of those guys for Texas.
Good
stuff.
By
the way, Blake, do we have Chase Calicut huddle? Can you get that ready from North Shore?
Is that the other guy you went to see yesterday?
Yeah. So after I left Decaney, I went to North Shore. By the way, they had their first boot camp workout. I'm glad I'm not doing that. I need to, but I'm glad I'm not. So this is Chase Calicut playing safety for North Shore, and was 194, 195 pounds at the. I got to hit the cough button. At Texas Junior Day, January 20th. I think with him, having gone to North Shore as many times I have over the years, knowing those guys, I think his frame, I can see outside linebacker with this guy long term. I trust the North Shore staff as well. He wants to be a safety, but I'm here to tell you, this guy's going to be big. Big. I mean, he's 6'3.5", almost 6'4", 195 pounds right now. And he hasn't even scratched the surface physically of what he's going to do. So it'll be interesting to see how he plays out. Somebody's asking, is he a high? Somebody put in a pick for him to Texas. I think that this recruitment's in the balance. He has, I think, watch out for Oregon here a little bit too. And I'm not saying he won't end up at Texas, but he has a number of family members that recently moved to Portland. So let's see where this goes. He has not set up a Texas official. I think Texas very much in it. Oregon's going to be in it, very much in it. Oklahoma is trying as hard as they can to be there. Michigan, I think, is trying to make a play for him as well. But I think there were some people that said, this is a done deal for Texas. I don't know about that. We're gonna have to see how this plays out with him. Because it could come down that where people recruit him positionally as well.
Where does he want to be recruited, Jerry?
He wants to be a safety.
Is he?
I don't know. I don't know, Bobby. I think this kid's going to be big. I think this kid's going to be. Now, could he be Isaiah Simmons? There's only one Isaiah Simmons we've seen. People get compared to that guy a lot. But how many guys are going to be 6'4", 225 that kind of are that hybrid guy? And I'm not saying he can or can't do it, but he's a really good player. But I will say this, it'll be interesting to see how big he gets because he's a bigger, longer frame guy than Jonah Williams, and they're built a little different. Jonah Williams can be a 210, 215-pound guy, I think, when he really fills out, especially playing 2 sports. It's going to keep him from getting bigger. But this guy has that longer, probably half an inch taller frame with really long arms. It's going to be hard to keep this guy under 225, 230.
Yeah, is he a big? Let me ask you a question. Is he bigger than Derek Williams or McDonald?
Oh yeah.
So bigger. So he's thicker than that, basically.
He has a bigger frame potential than those guys do. Yeah. Really good player. We'll see what happens. But again, the North Shore guys are pretty spot on their guys.
Yeah, that's good.
And they think it's in question whether he plays safety or backer.
Chase Calicut, is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, he was at the January 20 Junior Day. Look, I think there's some things close to Houston working in favor for Texas, as long as those people remain in Texas and don't move to Oregon with a lot of other family members that just moved to Portland a couple of years ago. So I just say, see what happens with this recruitment. A lot of people think it's a done deal, but these are battles. See what happens.
Yeah, rarely anymore is this something cut and dry, which is one of the reasons why Max Wright yesterday announcing so early somewhat surprising, right? I mean, not necessarily surprising to us. We kind of knew it was coming, but what I mean by that is a lot more guys take their time now and try kind of weigh their options definitely into June for their official visits at the very least. And when NIL starts becoming a bigger piece of it too at that point in time.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, guys, we got some super chats to get to here in just a moment. But first, I'm going to let everyone out there know about Prize Picks. And Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to everyone. It's the best way to get in on action on sports in more than 30 states, including right here in the great state of Texas, along with states like California, Georgia, and Florida. And the best part is Prize Picks invented the flex play, which means you can still cash out even if your lineup isn't perfect. You can actually double your money if one of your picks doesn't hit. It's a big saver, at least for me anyway. Hopefully you do a lot better than me. Obviously, the big game is almost here, and it's now or never. Don't miss out on the last football game of the season with Prize Picks, the absolute best place to win cash while watching the big game. And Prize Picks is doing a big game free square that is, well, essentially a lock. Patrick Mahomes only needs one passing yard for you to win that square. I'm all over that. I put in some new picks yesterday, included the Mahomes one. Excuse me. I also did Saquon Barkley to have one touchdown on the ground or through the air. Jalen Hurts to have less than a 67.3% completion rate. A.J. Brown to have less than 70 receiving yards. And Xavier Worthy to have more than 5 receptions. So my picks on the flex play will win you up to 5 times your money. So come join me in making those picks, or of course, go make your own. And if you download the app today and use code ONTexas, you'll get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. It doesn't matter if you win or lose, you still get the $50, so you can't beat that. Again, that's code ONTexas to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. And that's Prize Picks. Run your game.
Hey, by the way, people are asking the name of the On Texas baseball show. Are we going with Bases Loaded?
Bases Loaded.
Ski Breck put in Full Count, which is not bad either.
That's not bad.
Maybe Bases Loaded's a good one.
Bases Loaded is what we're going
because you're on first, CJ's on second, and Jeff Howell's on third.
There you go. You're coming in to bat it and knock us all in, I guess.
Not me.
Yeah, it won't be me either. I like Texas baseball, but I used to do this is going way back. My first year at Texas, I did my calculus homework in the right field bleachers down the right field line at Texas baseball games. I didn't get much done, and my grade reflected that. I'll just put it that way.
Brandon Huey with the walk-off, Trace Little stealing home. There's some really good baseball show names.
Yeah. Hey, let's talk a little replacements for Blake Gideon.
Yeah. And actually,
that's going to be the next conversation piece. Is Rod B going to try to put his name in there? Dwayne Aquina, the former Texas coach that's now co-DC over at Arizona. Way too early thoughts on the replacement. Aquina would be one that could be there. He was expected to go back to Texas at some point a year ago, right? And actually had accepted a position, and then Arizona made the hire they did, and that hire wanted Dwayne to be the defensive coordinator, so he had to go take a $500,000 a year job compared to a $100,000 a year job, which raise your hand if you wouldn't do that, and I'll point you to I'll see a bridge in Brooklyn. But my point being, he would be one. Jimmy Lake, the former Washington head coach, doesn't have a job right now. He's worked with Kwiatkowski. I don't know if those guys are necessarily simpatico, but
Nick
certainly
Saban,
a name up there.
Nick Saban's a good safeties coach.
Nick Saban would be tremendous. Yeah, he would clearly take a pay cut to come be the safeties coach at Texas.
Yeah, that was pretty funny, Brian Berg. I had to comment on that. That was extremely well done, Brian Berg. That's a winner.
Who would you go after, Jerry? Do you know any good recruiters out there? But Sark pulled Kenny Baker and Chris Jackson. Those are his last two position hires, along with Johnny Nansen. Now, Nansen, he had a prior relationship with, right? But Jackson and Baker, I mean, he kind of pulled those out of nowhere. We had heard about Jackson prior. He's not necessarily looking for a big name recruiter type. He's looking more for a fit, isn't he, Jerry?
I think so.
Stark's MO.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, that'll be interesting to see. I don't know on that. I don't have the answer for that one yet. I mean, look, is it that's a tough one. We're gonna have to see. We're gonna have to see what he will do there. I don't think I have that answer yet. But Jimmy Lake's interesting. We'll see. We'll see where that goes. But I don't know if I have that answer right now, Bobby.
Yeah, I don't either. I just thought we'd put some names out there, but I don't know. Here's the question. Is Sark either goes for an obvious guy that he knows, etc., or he goes for somebody that he's kind of done research on?
Right.
In my opinion. And my guess, if there's a lack of obvious choices, it's going to be a guy that he finds through research. Maybe he talks to Pete Carroll and said, or somebody like that, and says, who's a good young safeties coach that he's run across, right? I mean, that's the kind of thing.
Well, the other thing too, this is a good time to kind of talk about how that goes. It's just so people know, it's not just Sark out there doing his own research. It's done through Jimmy Sexton's agency. They have people, or who your agent is with it, Sexton with Sark. They have people in that agency whose job is to have names and possibilities ready for their head coaches when they have staff changes. So there's going to be that. It'll start with, unless Sark has somebody in his mind knowing this was going to happen, there's going to be a conversation with somebody at the Sexton agency as well on that, as far as some of the guys, the top guys in their opinion within that agency who do research, because it does happen though, Bobby.
It does happen, but Chris Jackson wasn't a Sexton guy, and
no, I don't mean Sexton guy, but I don't mean they have to be a Sexton guy, but they have a list of they have a build out of top assistants out there.
Yeah, that's true. They do. There's no doubt. Agents influence that all the time.
Yes. So we'll see what happens.
Still early. Speaking of coaches, Trace Little with the super chat. Thank you for the super chat as well, Trace. He says, I heard Tom Herman and Charlie Strong are coming back to team up for the Texas basketball team.
Hey, but Charlie Strong just took a job.
That's right. I was about to say that, Bobby. There you go. I'll let you read it for everybody.
The Tampa Bay Buccaneers hiring Charlie Strong as their new defensive line coach. He was formerly at Louisville, obviously, as well as Texas, but also he was in the college ranks for a bit at Miami, down there coaching defensive line. Good for Charlie Strong. Good guy. We'll never have a bad word to say about Charlie Strong as a person. As a coach, you could have all sorts of things to say, but based on your opinion, but good luck to him in his new job there at Tampa Bay. Really was a good person, in my opinion, Jerry, at the University of Texas.
Yeah, that's a congrats to Charlie. It's interesting how long some of these guys coach when they don't have to, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, he's got tens of millions of dollars.
Yeah, it's interesting.
They just love him. They just love coaching.
Yeah. He just keeps going back to analyst and coach, then analyst and coach. It's interesting. It's just what they know. I mean, he was that. There's some funny. Charlie was really, I would talk to him on recruiting stuff. I was more national back then, so multiple coaches would hit me up and ask me about kids or whatnot. But he called me from a treadmill at 4:30 in the morning one day. I was like, golly, dude, do you ever sleep? He said, I think the answer is I called you at 4:30 in the morning. So he's a funny guy. Good dude.
All right. We got one other super chat, guys. This one for you, Jerry. And this might be a an article idea maybe from Jack. Thank you as always, Jack. Jerry, could you give an eval on where each of the I assume he means early enrollees here stat out like you did for Justice Terry?
Ooh. Okay, yeah, I think he means start out positionally. So yeah, I think we can do that. I think we can do that's a good idea. Maybe do that this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, the only one that's questionable, or the ones that were questionable beyond beyond Justice Terry, tight end. He talked to Nick Townsend yesterday. He's starting at tight end. There might be some thought that he might get some time at defense because he's so darn good. Wide receiver, Michael Terry is starting at wide receiver, not at any kind of H-back or anything. Bo Barnes is a linebacker. Caleb Chester is a corner. Cade Phillips is a corner. And then Zealous Hicks and Jonah Williams are both safeties, but obviously Jonah Williams with the baseball team right now. What about the offensive line group, Jerry? Nick Brooks starting at tackle. You talked about that. What about the other offensive linemen in this number one ranked class?
I think Brooks will cross-train tackle guard, but he is seen as a tackle long-term. Jackson Christian as a guard. Devin Coleman will be interesting, guard or center, maybe center or guard.
But he's not an early. He and his brother
are not early enrollee, and then Jordan Coleman, not an early enrollee, is going to be a guard as well.
Okay, so 2 freshmen on the offensive line, 1 tackle guard, 1 guard.
Yeah.
Okay. Of the
and I do hear that there's a good chance that Brooks will end up at tackle long term at Texas.
Hey, Jerry, Charles and Sharma, which one's over the ball? Which one's more of a 3 in your opinion?
I think that's to be determined. I think they're both interchangeable. Because the interesting thing with those guys, they both have 3 tech disruptive athleticism and ability. But I also think I think Sharma would be more over a ball guy, but it's possible that both those guys are more 3s too, that play some over the ball.
Look, you mentioned the comparison for you for Sharma was always Sean Rogers.
Yeah.
Sean Rogers could have played both.
Yeah. That's the way I see both of these guys in this class. Yeah. By the way, somebody asked, we started, but I forgot to mention, somebody asked about Tiki Hola from Bastrop. Him and Texas continue to be in communication. So I do expect him to be on campus this spring, potentially June official visit. So yeah, Texas continues to recruit the 2026 defensive lineman from Bastrop.
And going back to some of the signees here, Frioli 93 says, what's the ideal weight for guys like Justice Terry or Lance Jackson to get to SEC playing level?
Bobby, I don't think it's necessarily weight with either one of those guys. Those guys are both bigger than Barron Sorrell and Ethan Burke right now, weight-wise. It's all about the strength and the leverage and technique and maximizing it all. But I think, look, Lance Jackson's going to be an edge that plays in NASCAR package, in my opinion, at 6'6", 285-ish at some point. Justice Terry, I think, is going to be more closer to 300 pounds when it's all said and done and be kind of a combo 3-5 guy like Alfred Collins, like we've talked about. But size-wise, they already have the size. So they're going to look like it. And the first open spring, if there's an open spring practice, people go out there and watch, they're going to already look like they're ready. But I think with them, it's more – and now Justice Terry, strength-wise, is ready. He's been training for it. Lance Jackson's been a 2-sport guy, and he's strong, but I think Lance Jackson's going to make some big, big frame gains from now to August.
Yeah. I agree with Jerry. It's not about weight. I think it might be a little bit about weight for a Justice Terry if he were to play a 3 technique.
Yeah.
Okay. If he's playing out at the 5, it's not so much about weight as it is play strength, what I call play strength. Like, can you fight through things? Can you hold things up? And, you know, even with a lack of a weight program, like a college weight program, some guys are more I'm just going to say that they're more naturally strong than others. And Jerry mentioned play leverage. That's a big piece of it. It's just a difference in people. And so I don't know that there's a weight is my problem. Do I think that Justice Terry one day is going to be 295 pounds? Yes.
Yeah,
I do. And he's going to be, you know,
really good. Really good.
Yeah, exactly. And so there's differences there, and I hesitate to sit here and say, well, Lance Jackson needs to be at 315 or 300 and 6'6" to be his best, because I don't know that. I don't know that. Ryan Nelson here. Georgia Tech is on the come up. Brent Key is a better coach than Norvell and Cristobal. This is the guy at Georgia Tech. And the reason we're mentioning that, if you're just now joining us, by the way, Blake Gideon, the defensive back coach, secondary coach, and specifically the safeties of the Longhorns, is now going to join Georgia Tech as the defensive coordinator, according to a report from Matt Zenitz out of 24/7 Sports. That is young Blake Gideon, former Longhorn, expected now to become the defensive coordinator at Georgia Tech.
By the way, to comment on what Ryan Nelson has said, the one thing when you watch Georgia Tech play, you never question what their identity is, to his point. I don't know if that was your point, but from an identity standpoint, you know what Georgia Tech is. That's actually I'm happy for Blake. I think that's a great move for him as he moves up to eventually be a college football head coach. I think it's a great move. Like, can you imagine if he had gone to Mississippi State as a DC last year and then, a Georgia? You never know. It was smart to turn that one down, be on another staff that made a playoff run once again, and then go to the correct job as a DC.
It's a winnable job. Georgia Tech is a winnable job.
Yeah. Not
saying that they're going to be the best team in the ACC, but it's a winnable job, and they've got a quarterback. I think that they're in. I think that's a good call, Jerry.
By the way, we'll bring this up right now. Somebody else asked, do the new recruits have a chance to leave? They're not. But no, it's head coach. I mean, anybody can jump in the portal when the portal opens, but no, it's good NIL at Texas.
Yeah. Assistant coaches do not allow the movement of assistant coaches. Do not give you a free 30-day transfer rule. They only give you that for head coaches.
Okay, Jerry, if you'll let everyone out there know about Gooder.
I can. I definitely can, because they're the great-looking Gooder UT glasses you see on Bevo. I was down on Gooder because, it's not a great shade today after Arkansas Calipari took our lunch money. Ooh, that was bad. All right, but these are stylish sunnies, starting only $25 a pair. 1 year free warranty, 30-day free returns, lightweight and comfortable, 100% polarized, no slip, no bounce, vibrant colors to sleek styles. They have it all. There's a pair of Gooders for everybody's personality, designed for both everyday wear and active individuals who love to run, hike, bike, and more. Tennis. Bobby, do you play tennis with your Gooders on? When do you wear your Gooder sunnies? On a run, playing pickleball, on a hike, going to the beach, because they're so affordable, and that is true. You don't have to worry about losing or breaking them. You can have one pair for every occasion. If you need a new pair of sunnies, Gooder is giving On Texas football listeners free shipping. You can go to gooder.com/OnTexas, all caps, and use that code OnTexas for free shipping. I have to read it. 30-day money-back guarantee. Throw that away. 100% satisfaction. I'll guarantee it. Again, gooder.com/OnTexas, all caps.
Thank you, as always. And some more questions we need to get into. We've had lots of Justice Terry questions, so we'll continue on with a couple more. Kenny Joe says, guys, with Justice Terry moving to DN, does that push Texas to take 2 more defensive tackles in the spring portal?
I think they were going to try to do that anyways, Kenny Joe. We knew they were going to take it. They're going to try to get at least one. This may push them to get 2, but I will say this: it doesn't change their internal look, because they already got to look at Justice Terry back in December. So they knew he was probably a defensive end in year 1 back in December. So they've probably been planning for this the whole time, even though it's just now being realized that he's probably going to get cross-trained at end. So Texas is absolutely on the prowl for at least 1 defensive tackle, if not 2, in the portal. I don't think it fundamentally changes the internal outlook there.
Yeah, and I mean, look, I want to reiterate this. Justice Terry could be 293 pounds by the end of August and be an interior player too. We're just saying where it's starting in the spring, but he's going to be in Kenny Baker's meeting rooms as well. He's just going to be cross-trained, starting his career in Baron Sorrell's spot this spring. That doesn't mean he won't take reps inside this spring, to be clear. It's just his future is going to be inside, or as in that Alfred Collins 5/3. Hell of a player. I think one more guy for sure, because look, you have Cole Brevard, Travis Shaw, Alex January as kind of your three staples. Melvin Hills had a good redshirt year. I think somebody asked about him. Expected to be a good rotational player. Then you have your third addition out of the portal in Hero Canoe, who's played a lot of football now, or been in a college strength and conditioning program for 3 years and has been developed a lot. And then you have your two freshmen, Myron Charles and Josiah Sharma. So you really, one more guy, I think, is probably where Texas is headed. Cody Pack said Ryan Day extended 7 years, $12.5 million. Okay.
Yep, through the 2031 season. And then also on a somewhat related note, we found out yesterday that Ohio State has found their new offensive coordinator and wide receivers coach Brian Hartline. And so Texas heads to Columbus for the opening game of the season, but curious to get y'all's thoughts on a guy that has zero play calling experience.
I was going to say, never called a play. Hell of a recruiter. It's different when you have the headsets on trying to make a play call. I bet Ryan Day helps him out quite a bit. I'll just put it that way. Because that if you've never called a game before, it's going to come at you fast and furious. And for the first one to be against Texas, we'll see how he does. I'm almost betting that this is Ryan Day's way of soft pedaling himself back into play caller role at some level. That's just my sense of it. Otherwise, you have to go with someone that has experience at a place like Ohio State. You don't learn on the job at Ohio State. It's just not that kind of place. Just like you don't really learn on the job at Texas much, not in a play caller's role.
That'll be interesting.
Those are not the types of places you do that.
I need to answer this question. I should be good. By the way,
can't be missing any more coffee and football. If Luka can get traded, ain't nobody safe.
Look, let me say this. For those Mavs turned Lakers fans now, they added a huge piece at center to run that ball screen game and lob game. The Duke, former Duke player at the Wizards to the Lakers last. That's like, watch that trade. LA's got a chance now, I think. I still didn't think they had a chance before. Now I think they have a chance. Brandon Huey has this. Do you see any similarities between Terry and Brian Orakpo? I do not. Justice Terry's, if he stayed at edge forever, he's a power edge. He is Michael Williams, not Orakpo. It would be more Michael Williams-like. Rack is, you're talking Colin Simmons, Rack, that type of dude.
Long-limbed primarily is what you think of when you think of Brian Orakpo and Colin. You don't think of a power guy per se, even though they have power. And Orakpo showed that. Jerry, there are a couple of offers that went out. We needed to mention this. Zion Ely, Texas offered him big defensive end up at St. Francis in Baltimore. They offered him yesterday, defensive end. I'm looking at it, and this means with this offer, and correct me if I'm wrong, Texas has now offered players up and down the East Coast, okay? And I'm not just talking about Florida. I'm talking about the true East Coast. Virginia, North Carolina, Maryland, New Jersey. They've offered players in all of those areas. This is different. Now, they haven't gone whole hog in that area, but I'm trying to tell you, when we talked about broadening your scope of recruiting, offering a kid in Maryland is part of that. I really believe that. And so they're starting to reach up the Atlantic coast with those offers from North Carolina in particular, then Virginia, now Maryland. It's a little bit different look for Texas.
Yeah, I'm interested to see if it's a one-year thing, because they're just where the D linemen are in this 26 class. And maybe not the depth in Texas on the edge position or D line or what they like, what they're seeing out there. We'll see long term. I think like the 4 offers in Charlotte, it's a great defensive line class in North Carolina. So I think that has a lot to do with that. But it'll be interesting to see, like in the D lineman from Virginia, Sone, obviously he came to the States from Sweden. So he's maybe a special case as well. And a D line, look, here's my take on this. If there were 5 Texas level edge prospects in the state this year, I don't think they'd be going out of state for edge. If there were 5 D tackle level guys, the Texas level D tackles in their eyes in the state, I think at least half your class would come from the state. I just don't think that's there in this class or what they're saying. I'm not saying guys aren't really good players because they are, but I'm interested to see where it goes from here.
Is Jamion Winfield still the defensive tackle inside the state? Young man out of Richardson.
Yeah, Jamion Winfield. If he goes to Under Armour Combine in Dallas and puts up testing numbers, watch it. That guy may end up being a 5-star prospect in this class. It's not going to surprise me after seeing him in person.
What about the other offer that went out? We didn't talk about it yesterday because we got so busy and we forgot about it. Martin Grammatica's son apparently has been offered by Jeff Banks as a kicker. Jerry, tell us a little bit about him if you don't mind.
Yeah, no, I mean he's 13 and 19 field goals, long of 55. Obviously, he is one of the best top kickers in the country in that class. I like the offer, obviously, but one of the top kickers in the class and has a powerful leg. Obviously, he's gonna have great technique, right, and an understanding. But breathing, he's gonna have the breathing technique of the position down. And I'm not making a joke about celebrations, but big leg, and he has an NFL level leg. We'll see where it goes for him.
Yeah. Well, as long as he doesn't like injure himself celebrating like his dad did,
yes.
that would be the big piece of it. But he's out of the state of Florida, right?
That's one with his dad. If you had your bingo card, that's one you'd have never, you'd have been like, I will never see a kicker tear an ACL celebrating in my life, Bobby. You would never think you would see that.
Not celebrating like the Georgia guy tore his against Texas.
Right.
That was making a tackle, I think.
That's one. I mean, if I ever see that again, I'll be surprised. I mean, like that one's. Yeah, I think Casey Hampton's first ACL happened that way against Rice.
Oh, I was at the game.
Yep. Casey Hampton took 2 Rice guys, threw him down, and tackled the running back, and got up and jumped, and he tore his ACL on the way down. It was wild to see. I was there as well. That was crazy.
Yeah. That was at Rice Stadium.
Yes.
Ken Hatfield was running the option that day, baby. Right up the gut.
Yes.
We got a super chat from Texas fan in Sooner Land. Texas recruiting in Florida and Georgia right now is big. Which state does Texas have the best chance of winning at the moment? Georgia or Florida?
I think it's pretty much even, but as long as FSU has let's look at it this way. Per capita, the highest hit rate in the country is going to be Greater Atlanta. Now, Georgia also owns a lot of that ground. And then you have Tennessee and Clemson and Alabama. You have so many people, Auburn, 2.5. There's so much competition in Greater Atlanta. And you also have a very solid program in Georgia and one of the cool programs in college football for kids. Florida, Miami, you still don't know what to think about it long term. Florida State, one more bad year, you're going to have a coaching change. Florida, Napier was on the hot seat. Now his seat feels nice going into the spring, but if he loses a couple early, he's right back on the hot seat, especially with DJ Lagway now, and the expectations are different. Florida, there's more areas, Bobby, I think you have a chance to win, especially when some of those teams are in flux right now still. Because Billy Napier in Florida, we're both high on them, but they're still in flux because if he doesn't start the season off well with the expectations, then his seat's going to get hot again there next year.
I'm going to say this. I think it's Georgia. and I think it's because of travel. And what I mean by that is Atlanta airport, 6 or 7 directs a day to Austin. It's harder. Like last year, I'll just put it this way. Texas signed 4 guys from Georgia last year, 2 from Florida. Okay. They recruited Florida really hard last year. Or actually 3 guys from Florida. I'm sorry. French, Myron Charles, and Grayson Littleton.
Yeah.
So 4 and 3. I think that's probably the mix that they're looking for. It's not an overwhelming difference. But I think that suburban Atlanta is a easy place to recruit to Texas. So I would say that. I would say Georgia over Florida slightly, but not by a large margin.
Okay, Bobby, before we get to our last couple of questions here, I'm going to let you tell everyone about Austin Underground one last time.
Yeah, absolutely. Austin Underground and Rick Vavro, they have specialized in difficult underground commercial installations since 2004. The team's engineering background gives them the ability to perform work other firms often consider too risky. Rick and his team offer an end-to-end client experience, including seamless communication, budgeting, staffing, and top-notch trade partners. And most importantly, they produce solid quality work each and every time. That's Austin Underground. Thank you, Rick Vavro and your team. They dig Austin.
Okay, we got a couple more here. This one from Rudy. Thank you, Rudy. With teams opting out of the spring games, does it make the earlier portal window more important?
It's an interesting point.
I don't know yet, Rudy.
Good question.
Yeah, it could. But look, Andrew McCuba, or who came in the spring? Who came after the spring this year for Texas in the portal? Jermaine Lole, right?
Bill Norton, Lole.
Bill Norton. They already had tape. They didn't need spring game. And so, Rudy, I would say, I bet for teams like Texas, they don't need to see spring games for these guys. Now, it could hurt some other teams, though, in that regard. I don't think it hurts Texas because they're going to be going more for proven commodities.
And Johnny Epps said thoughts on if there's no spring game. We talked about that. We thought that was very much up in the air.
And we've been talking about it since last week.
Yeah.
I think that I think they'll end up doing a day of festivities. CDC doesn't need a reason to throw a party, but he will find one to celebrate football. I think that it would be great because, I mean, look, this team had a wonderful year too. Have they been celebrated yet? Not in the fundamental way, right? And so I think CDC is going to come up with something, even if there's not a actual spring game. He'll find a reason. I thought last year, for example, the SEC party that Texas had on campus, welcome to the SEC, was just a great way to get people out to the university. I'd love to see more of those things actually and involve the football team in that somehow.
But yes, Silas Bolden was a guy that was not available for spring practice last year too. That was the third one. Yep, Javion Cole.
Okay. If you have tape, it's just not the same.
Yeah.
Last one for today comes from UT Tyler Guy. Hypothetically, we win the Natty if these 3 things happen.
Arches is good or better than expected is number 1. Okay. Without quarterback play, elite quarterback play with this team, given that it's a little bit younger, you're not winning a national championship. That's 1. Beyond that, someone steps up at running back on the interior. You can't just, I mean, look, he can't run outside zone all year long like he did last year and expect to win. So I don't know what that's going to mean. You got to develop an added piece of the run game to Trey Wiseman. Hopefully, that is Cedric Baxter. Hopefully. I mean, everybody here hopes But we can't sit there and say it's going to be Cedric Baxter because this injury is not one to tinker with. And then I think the other piece for me is defensive continuity. You know, the secondary in particular, you lose two guys that are extremely bright and play smart football and also are good players. Jahdae Barron and Andrew Makuba. How many starts between those guys do you lose?
Yeah.
I mean, what, 80, 100 between two players?
I think if I added one, it would be red zone.
Yeah, that's a good one.
The ability to impose your will in the red zone.
It's run between the tackles for me.
Yeah.
And maybe that's with Arch, right? We've talked about that. Good question.
Yeah, that's a good question.
All right, guys. What'd you say, Jerry?
I was going to lead you into your close.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for today's edition of Coffee and Football presented by Rick Favreau and Austin Underground. We want to thank them, along with Gooder and Prize Picks, all for sponsoring today's show. Thank you all for tuning in. The great questions, the super chat. Be sure to head on over to ontexasfootball.com to continue the discussion. Remember, we can't be here all the time. And if you haven't already, become a member very, very easily. Just use promo code OTFOG. You'll get a full year for $49.95 at ontexasfootball.com. And Bobby, what do you have later today?
Well, I mean, we got a couple of different things. Football Theory coming up with Rod and Jeff. They're going to talk a little of that. They've also got the winning drive this afternoon. CJ Vogel stepping in with Bob Shipley and Rod Babers. And then online, we've got a number of different things coming out, including this massive move. There's going to be some reaction to it. And if you just are tuning in and missed it, Blake Gideon, the safeties coach at the University of Texas, apparently accepting a new role to become the defensive coordinator at Georgia Tech. That'll be something that we are following all day long. So we'll talk about that as well. All right, guys, that's going to do it for today's episode. Blake, my take to you guys with this Blake Gideon piece is wish him well. Hope we see him around in Longhorn burnt orange sometime soon again, because he's a good guy, represented the University of Texas in a first-class manner, recruited hard, put in the work to get this opportunity elsewhere. So happy for him and his family.
That's right. All right, we'll be back same time, same place tomorrow. So for Bobby Burton and Jerry Hamilton, I'm Blake Monroe, and we'll see